my father already, My father has taken over a company in 1970 that was specialized in the assembly of mechanical movements.
Okay.
And so we are, and even my granduncles, the brothers of my grandfather, they were working for the family that was assembling the Western watches in the 1950s, 60s.
Oh.
They worked until they were 70 because there was so much demand.
And that's because of the region here.
Yes. So,
and
my father was a child. My father is 81. He was a child, the last child of the family, and his uncles were coming to the family and explaining they had the visit of Mr. Jacob Behbehani, in the Jura at that time, in the 50s, 60s. This was not common.
So, welcome to Kuwait, Jeroom.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be with you today.
And when was your first time visiting Kuwait? You remember?
2001. So it was another time.
Wow. And actually, I will touch base on different things of manufacture and what you do, because you manage something bigger than just West End. But today we want to talk about West End. So I want from you to briefly take us through the history of West End.
Sure.
When did it start, and why is the name West End? And it's a Swiss brand.
Yes, certainly.
So let's start from Switzerland.
Yes, so the Western Watch Company was launched in the 1880s. So we have an official date of 1886, but the brand was already around a few years before. This brand was initiated in Bombay, in India. One of the sons of the Alcide company of Saint-Imier, the city where Longines also was born, or brands like Heuer. One of their sons went to Bombay at the time of the British Empire to market the production of the family company, and it was already a big size company. I think of course there is Longines, that is the major company in Saint-Imier, but this Dro family was an important producer. They used later on to still produce watches until the 70s under the Berna brand. Mm-hmm. So a very, very important family. In the 1850s, they had registered the first patent for a water-resistant pocket watch. So just to give, of course, in the 1880s, the watches were not wristwatches; they were pocket watches, and the company was selling these watches on the British Indian market. They were marketing these watches for the railway system, for the civil services, and for the army. To say just an anecdote from the early years of the brand, they had imported watches with the lady that is on the Swiss coins, the Helvetia. And these watches were a total flop. They could not sell these watches because Hindu or Muslim customers were not accepting this representation of a god or whatever. So one of the salesmen had the idea to change the logo on the brand on the dials and to make it West End Watch Company, because he had been a few months before in London, the heart of the empire. Yeah. And the West End, as most of the people know, is the very heart of London, with a lot of luxury boutiques and theaters. So at the time, it was really the heart of the empire, and from the start, it became a very big success. And so the brand, at the end of the 19th century, became the number one brand already in the British Indian market. They were producing mostly very strong and reliable pocket watches. Later on, at the turn of the century, the 20th century, they were also producing very high-end watches for Maharajas. Such watches were recently auctioned at Antiquorum for 50 to 100,000 Swiss francs. They were adorned with precious stones. They were also sometimes featuring repetition minute or chronographs. Really highest end watches that they were sourcing from the Valley Jew. So West End, beyond the family production, was also supplied by other companies. I think it came in around 1905. The family had some disagreements. Probably they said the quality of the watches was not sufficient. So from 1905, they separated. And the West End was purchasing from many suppliers. If you say a little bit later, after World War I, for instance, the brand Tissot, that was experiencing big difficulties after the Russian Revolution, was supplying during 3-4 years 25% of its production to West End. And it's not the only case. Many important companies have supplied West End in its history.
So you mean from the manufacturer who used
Yes,
to do West
from the-
End?
yes.
They had a disagreement, and
Within
kind
the
of-
family, and so the brother that was established in India started also to purchase from other companies later on.
So it became kind of a separate company in
Yes.
India that produced in Switzerland and shipped to India.
Yes, watches were always produced in Switzerland. I really have to emphasize this point. And West End has sold perhaps 20 million watches over 140 years of uninterrupted activity, which is remarkable, taking into account all the difficulties of the markets and the industry itself. Yes.
And that's actually a very good point that I have a question about, because a lot of companies, especially in Swiss, and before doing the podcast, we were talking about companies going through difficult times. And a lot of the historical companies actually stopped producing for a very long time, right? West End is not one of them. It's not one of them. It's always been produced. It's always been...
Yes, West End has been active without interruption. You know, there are big names that are, for instance, saying they've never produced any quartz watches. The reason was that they were not active during the quartz crisis. So just as a joke, of course, like in the 1970s, the Swiss watch industry experienced a very deep and fatal crisis for most of the brands. There were a few thousand brands. You see, not every brand is Rolex or Patek or Tissot. There were hundreds and hundreds of small brands that were run by businessmen and that had special particular markets. My father always gives the example of a brand that had only one market in Cuba, and when the revolution came in Cuba, the man lost his market. But in the 70s, you know, most of the watch producer disappeared or died.
Yeah.
You see, there were 90,000 employees in the watch industry at that time. In the, let's say, early 70s, and 10 years later, early 80s, there were only 30,000 workers in the watch industry.
Oh, wow.
And I think I could say like 80% of the brands disappeared in this difficult period.
80%?
Yes. The volume that was close to 100 million mechanical watches at the time came down to, let's say, only 1/3. And in the 70s, of course, everybody says this crisis was due to the emergence of quartz watches, but not only. I would say if we really go beyond the storytelling, it was not only a technological revolution in the 70s with the quartz watches, but I think the main reason was rather the weakening of the dollar, the US dollar. You see, the dollar was at that time like close to $1, 5 Swiss francs. A few days back, thanks to Mr. Trump, the dollar today is 0.88 Swiss franc.
Yeah.
And I think these events have contributed to a deep change in the industry. I was giving also an example the other day. Few people know that, but at the turn of the 1970s, only 10 Swiss watch brands were producing watches ex-factory prices above 100 Swiss francs. So they were probably brands like Patek, Vacheron, that were not at the time in very good shape. Most of the watch production in Switzerland were watches of low prices. You had brands like West End that were always producing high-quality mechanical watches with stones. You see within the movements, but like 40 to 50% of the watches at the time were Roscoff watches that were very, very cheap and affordable. So really, we have to sometimes remind the people about the real history of the watch industry that has sometimes been a little bit
dramatized.
yes, or
it became
hyped.
It is very, very sensitive. And you mentioned something very important, and then I have a question for West End. West End is very, very known in our region in India, and not everywhere else.
Yes.
And that's something we always talk about. So if we take it historically, so they went to India, they advertised only in India, right?
Yes, they had a very big showroom in Bombay. I went there a few years back and was very sad to consider. You know, the next door to this big building that was sold is the headquarters of the Tata Group. So this is really in the very heart of Bombay. And they had a second also headquarters in Calcutta. And with these two sales houses, of course, they had a network all over the British Empire that was going from Afghanistan to Burma. And so West End became, in the turn of the 20th century, one of the biggest brand, and then the biggest brand in India. They were supplying, you can imagine, all the army forces, railways, civil services. Yes. And so they had a really deep impact on the Indian market from basic watches, sometimes very, very rough pocket watches, to watches for Maharajas. And what happened is that later, unfortunately, you see with the independence of India in the 1940s, the market has been cut. The new government of India wanted to develop the production in India itself. And so they banned the import with very high tariffs. So it's the reason why the brand, after the 1950s, had to close their showrooms. There was a showroom still a floor in Bombay until the year 2000. But you see, I have read the history of the brand from the old files of the former director in 1973. And he was really crying, imagining all the efforts they had put on this market and seeing it disappear due to political reasons. And luckily, the brand had already started selling some watches in the Middle East. Yeah. I think, yes.
How did it get to the Middle East?
So there is a first very important history. It is during World War I, the brand supplied over 50,000 wristwatches. You know, these were the real first wristwatches in the Swiss industry. It's common to remind that Girard-Perregaux had produced some wristwatches for the German army during World War I. But West End, can you imagine 50,000 wristwatches during World War I that had to be delivered to Bombay, and they equipped this big unit of British Indian Army that went to Basra. So they went to fight against the Turks and the Ottoman coalition in Basra. They were defeated, by the way. But I think these dozens of thousands of watches were that came here during World War I already. Probably, probably some of these units, British Army. In our history, people say probably Lawrence of Arabia had a Western watch. I mean, at least these units that contributed to the emergence also of the Arab nations.
Yeah. So it was kind of like introduction when they saw it in the hands of the British Army. And
yes, and probably you see some people were killed, some people exchanged their watches against other goods or whatever. At least this is what I would say as a first introduction to the region. What I've read from the files is that in the late 1920s, they first supplied some watches to Iran. And then in the early 30s to Bahrain. Mm-hmm. At the time, Bahrain was already an advanced country with the first oil exploitation. Mm-hmm. And then, very important point for the history of our brand, in 1938, Mr. Jacob Yusuf Behbehani purchased first batches of watches through California House in Bahrain and sold them in Kuwait. And there was an interruption during World War II. Although what I read from our old files is that you see it was a very terrible time for the company. They had a lot of difficulties to ship watches to India. That was at the time still the main market. Mm-hmm. There are some incredible stories. They sent watches via America through South Africa, and then the boat was torpedoed, sunk, and then they had to ship it again through Argentina via Portugal. And these watches were going all over
the way to get to India.
Yes, like the Magellan trip. And so it was a very difficult time. So it was also the interruption of the collaboration with the Behbehani family that restarted in 1946. And from that, it was an incredible success story. I think the brand has been very lucky to find a second life, because with the end of the Indian market in the 1940s, 50s, the brand could have been really deeply hurt. Just if I can add a few information, so also important for the industry, for the people that are interested in Swiss watches, Western was the official representative of Longines in India until the 1950s. Western was the only brand for which Longines was producing complete watches without any Longines name. And I think this contributed to also the excellent quality of Western watches in India. Western was also the representative of Mido during 10-15 years. Western was receiving Multifort, Western Watch Co. Multifort watches, the first automatic watches with bumpers. And we're marketing them in India. So you see, something I really would like to emphasize is that the watch industry that today is very specialized with brands that have their real pure identity was very much more collaborative in the past. And I think perhaps should we also take some lessons of the past.
And that's how watchmaking started in Switzerland, right? They used to go, actually, if you go all the way to the history, this is how watchmaking started in Switzerland after the movements from France. And this guy used to do the enameling, this guy used to do the cases and such. And then you combine them with a name.
You see, the watch industry, I would say until the early 2000s, has always been very fragmented with specialized suppliers for components. You see, the Swiss government in the 1930s has tried as much as possible to put the company together. They created the so-called Bosch SI, Bosch Limited, that was a big structure that should bring together many suppliers of components for movements. You see, these components of these producers of components, of movements components, were not authorized to assemble movements. So they were specialized company like my father's company that were specialized in the assembly of movements. And all these was somehow jeopardized with the emergence of big groups, and in particular with the strengths of the Swatch group, with ITA movements that had become the kind of monopoly. Supported by the Swiss government. Yeah. And so anyway, this is another story that we can come back later on.
We'll talk about that actually, the family and such. So we got to the 30s and then to the 40s, and then we got to a period in the region. And of course, Mr. Aqil, Mr. Abbas, whenever we talk to anyone from the Behbahani family, they used to tell us that Western used to sell way more than any other watch. It used to be in every other magazine. It used to be like, how was the impact of Behbahani with Western and the distribution that happened in the region? So
we can clearly see, as much as Western has been the number one brand in India, Western has been also a pioneer in the Gulf region, in the Arabic Peninsula, and with incredible volumes. In the 1970s, before the Iranian Revolution, Western was producing 1 million mechanical watches with 500 technicians, and not, again, I would like to say, high quality mechanical movements, watches. When we come back to the 1940s, Mr. Yaqub Behbahani, that was already from a very important merchant family in the region, restarted after the war, and with the incredible development of the region during the oil era, let's say from the 1950s to the 1980s, he was really instrumental in the development of this brand. So Mr. Yaqub was the major agent, sole agent for the region, with sub-agents that he was supplying all over the region. With the time, these sole agents have these sub-agents have also become independent. But we'd say during 20, 30, 40 years, it was really thanks to the strengths and the key presence of the Behbahani family in Kuwait that the brand developed. I've been told, stories that, for instance, Mr. Yaqub was also helping with the financing of this production. You can imagine when you have to move 1 million watches a year, you need to purchase components. Like in the 70s, with advance payment, he was supporting the production of these watches, and at the same time, the company that was producing the Western watches at the time, the Aubry company, was also financing the Fontaine-Melon FHF factory in amounts like 15 to 20 million Swiss francs. It was also a battle to get these components with such a booming time. And so you can imagine how both the Western Watch Company and the Behbehani family were working in a very extremely close relationship.
And do you think because of the efforts and the amount that you used to send in the region that West End became very popular in this region, nowhere else? Because when you speak to a Swiss guy, he wouldn't know West End.
Yeah, yes,
very interesting.
This is, you see, the incredible success that the brand experienced in the 1950s, 60s, 70s. I have these figures from the archives in the company. Every year, when you increase every year 10, 20%, it's incredibly difficult to
especially watches, very hard to produce.
Yes, and
like
high quality
printing.
watches. I would like to emphasize again, they were disposing of these high quality FHF movements, hand winding. They had cases produced by the best Swiss case suppliers, like a company like Donzeboom in Les Breleux, Jura, that was recently purchased by Cartier. They were having the dials from the company Flückiger that was for some 20, 30 years taken over by Patek. So you can imagine these watches that were selling for, I don't know at the time, 100, 200 Swiss francs. They were at the highest level of Swiss watchmaking. And so this contributed also the quality that was produced by the company and the strong relationship that the Behbehani family had all over the Gulf region. Also, one of the main markets was, of course, Iran. What I know also from the history of the brand, that the brand was selling 1,000 watches a day to Iran before 1979.
1,000 watch a day?
Yes. Per working day, let's say, like 250,000 watches.
Huge market,
yes, and these watches were sent from Kuwait, but later on also from Qatar with the Lari family, and also in Dubai, of course, with the Sediki family that started with the Western brand. So it's a very long history.
It is, and it's a very interesting history because whenever we talk to any, let's say, long-standing family who's into business, Behbehani from 1915 or something, like Murad Behbehani in Omega, 30s with Omega, and then West End. Siddiqui, they're celebrating 70 years. You mentioned Lari in Qatar, in Doha. These families started watches from West End.
Yes, because so I think by default, because West End was also one of the few brands already present in the region. And yes, this is really very particular. And you were asking before, why is the Western brand not known globally? Yeah. I would say, you see, the brand is known from, let's say, the Red Sea to China. And I think this is already a very big world. I remember reading also from the files of the company that in the 1980s, the former owner, the family Aubry, that had a very big factory in the Jura region, appointed Mr. Hayek, father. At the time, he was, with Hayek Engineering. He had a consultant company that was also appointed to save the SSI Edge and Azure groups that formed later the Swatch group. But the Aubry family had appointed this Hayek company to try to find a way for the future, if they should invest in other markets. You see, after the Iranian Revolution, the volume dropped. And so they were trying many solutions. In 1978, already they had purchased two important brands. One of them was Doxa, and the other was Ernest Borel. They also had 1-2 other brands, historical brands like Dogma. And they were asking themselves whether they should develop a global market. And the result of this study from the Hayek Consulting Group was that West End should concentrate on the existing markets. The Aubry family being a family company, as we are today also a family company, we are forced to be very selective in our choices and to focus on the strengths. And
And also, from what I get when I talk to Mr. Aqil, Mr. Abbas, what I know is that if you produce 1 million, Yaqub, Allah rahmah, would buy it. If you produce 1.5 million, it will also come to Kuwait. So that's how the demand was. And I heard this a lot from Abbas saying, whatever number is produced, it's gonna come to Kuwait. So it was difficult
Yes.
even for them to.
Yes, for instance, they also try to develop market. There are very interesting stories from this former director. It was like a novel. They had so many difficulties. People you see coming to their Geneva office because the office was until 1973 in the old, from 1905 to 1973 in the old city of Geneva, in the best areas. And they had suddenly people coming from Lebanon. And they were very happy. They thought we could start opening new markets. They were also already selling in other markets, like in Eastern Africa, where there were a lot of Indian merchants. But every time they tried to open a new market, the watches would end in Kuwait. You see also, if you go through Instagram, you can see many also in this summary of the history. There are, I think, a number of 20 to 25 trials, because so many brands would try to copy the Western models, you see, with the star in the middle, trying to abuse the name. Also, you see people were trying to produce watches on the East End Watch Company. So this is a really incredible story. And but I think thanks to the deep involvement of this Gulf family, the brand has been able to, after World War II, from the 1950s to, let's say, 2000, to survive in a very difficult environment. I don't speak of the Kuwait invasion or of so many political crises, and also from the Swiss perspective, with all the crises that the industry went through. I think it's really this particularly close relationship. Western is more than just a watch producer. I always say, although you see I'm involved since the year 2000, when we took over this company in 2001, but I was already involved before as a young man. This brand is beyond us. This brand doesn't belong to us. It belongs to a community of people. We share a common spirit. That is already now 140 years.
And believe me, when we started with Behbehani, when we started selling West End, it was when we talked to the older generation, they were very, very happy to know, West End is still there. And every single time we talk to a person who purchased West End for his dad, his grandfather, they have these very nice memories of saying, I still remember this watch. And I still remember when I was like 12, 13 years old, looking at the loom, trying to figure out the time, and it would hide. Actually, my dad told me that. I still remember the watch where I put my eye so I can see the loom. So it has a huge, huge history. But now I want to talk about what you mentioned just now. Your company, your family business, it's bigger than just West End. So you own a manufacturer, which is very difficult in this time, because we know from what we've been dealing with and what's the Swiss, now we have the big groups. And then we have much smaller brands that don't own any manufacturer. They just get from vendors. But you guys produce your own watches. You do your own quality control and everything, correct?
Yes. So how we came to this, how my family, Mouna family, came to this Western history. My father, who is now 81, took over a company in the canton of Valais, where we are located. It is just upstream from Geneva, in the direction of the Zermatt, Matterhorn. We are the only watch company still in this region. And we employ 100 technicians. My father took it over in 70 after 6 months in Geneva. His employer at the time had a small unit in the canton of Valais, and he was struggling with this unit, losing money. Some of the local managers had stolen money, and we are at the time there were no highways, and it was a very long trip from Geneva to this region. Now it takes around 1 hour 30 minutes. And so my father took it over in 1970. He was 26 years old and immediately specialized in the assembly of automatic movements. You see, automatic movements, they were not so common at the time until the crisis, when the Swiss watches were produced to 100 million a year. These were mostly hand-winding movements that were simple, reliable, and the automatic movements were less reliable. They were requiring a lot of hard work. And so we specialized in this in the assembly of automatic movements, and this proved a very good decision, because my father was telling me when I was born in 1976, it was already the deep crisis in Switzerland, and we had so much work My father had to open another workshop. He had taken over another workshop that had been bankrupt nearby. They had 120 people, and just 1 week later, he had again 80 people because we had so many movements to assemble. And so we were able to go through all these difficult times of the 1970s. And till today, so we are for 60 years now active in this assembly of mechanical automatic movements. And we have been able, as very few companies in Switzerland, to survive as an independent assembly company. I would say today there are 3 units like ours that are independent in the assembly of mechanical movements. And of course, the hundreds and hundreds of customers that were existing in the 1970s came down to more or less one company in the 1990s. It was ITA. We were assembling for ITA close to 1 million automatic movements in the early 1990s. And then they started to decide to make it in-house. And for us in 1993-4, more or less from one day to the other, they abandoned us as they abandoned other suppliers that were assembling quartz movements for them. So it was the start of this strategy to control the market. And so for us, it was a very difficult time. And within a few years, we were able to find a new collaboration for the repair of mechanical movements. So we started to repair for big brands, big volumes of automatic movements. And so we have been able to evolve. And also later on in the 2010, we have also started assembling manufacture movements for the top Swiss brands. These brands trying their best to become independent from the Swatch Group, from ITA. And so we have been able to, in the last 50, 60 years, to maintain these competencies. It's not easy because you see most of the watchmakers that we had at the start in the 70s, 80s, these people have just gotten retired in the last 5-10 years. And there was a big empty time for the industry. Nobody wanted to become a watchmaker in the 1890s. So anyhow, we have been able to pass on these competencies, even to increase them, because nowadays it's very important due to the price of Swiss watches to be really at the highest level of accuracy and competencies. And today we also assemble dozens of thousands of chronometers. So these activities separated, they are run by my 2 brothers under the Mona Limited company, and Western is another company separate that I run independently, but we are from the same family. And so these competencies, these technical competencies, plus the assembly of our complete watches in-house.
And so that's a very
we
important
have small
thing.
units, you see,
control.
Yes, I think humbly a big part of our success beyond the close relationship that we have with our partners for 70, 80 years is also the capacity of producing high quality watches in-house. You see today a lot of competencies have been lost in the industry. And most of the company are purely marketing companies with a few computers and smiling ladies to welcome customers. We are rather at the other side. We are perhaps sometimes too much production led. But we are producing. I compare sometimes. You see, if you compare our watches to perhaps some fashion brands would be like McDonald's, and we are a nice family restaurant where everyone is taking care of the best ingredients, and the boss is there. You see, my wife is a watchmaker. She's very much involved in the process. So we are really pouring our heart into all the watches that we produce.
And it shows, to be honest, it shows. So if we talk about the current collection of West End, how would you divide it in your mind?
So most of the watches that we produce today are automatic watches. We still produce some quartz watches, but like in Dubai, for instance, we are not selling quartz watches anymore. It's really difficult to find some arguments for Swiss-made quartz watches. Especially in the last 10-15 years, the fashion watches have been so strong in the market. It was really difficult to sell quartz watches. So we are concentrating more and more on automatic, which has always been our strength. Yeah. So today our watches are concentrating on a few automatic lines, mostly for gents. We are trying to improve our offer for ladies. We see an important potential in lady automatic watches in sizes like 26 to 34. Ladies want automatic watches, and so we are trying our best to push in this direction. We have introduced in the last 2-3 years now watches with real diamonds that were never available in our brand. You see, it was a matter of positioning. And when I took over this company as the managing director in 2001, unfortunately, for too many years, our predecessors had pushed mass production by lowering the prices and trying to keep volumes. I remember the late Mr. Ibrahim Sediki was telling me for 20 years, Western watches was selling watches in the 1980s. And an automatic Western watch was selling for 400 dirham. And a Rolex was selling for 2,000 dirhams. And in the meantime, Rolex had increased by 10 times the price to, let's say, 20,000 dirhams at the time. And our predecessors had reduced the price of Western watches from 400 to 200 dirhams in a desperate way to keep volumes. And can you imagine when I came in the year 2000, 200 dirhams is like 100 Swiss franc public. So it is not really so suitable for automatic watches.
It goes on to the quality first.
Yes, so you see, it took us many years. It was really a very difficult time from the year 2000 to 2005, 10 to again be able to ride the horse. There were big stocks in the markets. You see also the end of the 90s mark a big change in the market. If you remember Seiko 5 watches that were selling by millions. We have also a very important agent in Saudi Arabia since 1983, the Al Husseini company. They were leader in the automatic watches for pilgrims. They were selling 6 million Seiko 5, they told me, in the best years, and 500,000 Western watches. So
6 million, all
6 million to pilgrims mostly. So at the end of the 90s, this market started to reduce much with the strengthening Far East quartz watches and a change in the interest of the customers. So you see, we came a very long way. It was for us very difficult in the year 2000 to 2010 to bring something beyond the low price point. At the same time, the Swiss franc became to play stupid, and it will further due to the exchange rate with the dollar. Also, at the same time, the ITA movements that we were purchasing tripled in price. ITA made us big difficulties. Really, I'm very bitter because we consider ITA as really, the heritage of the Swiss watchmaking industry. And from 2005 to 2020 and 2020, we have been really squeezed in volumes. We have been facing a lot of counterwind. So we have never been able to sometimes develop the watches that we wanted to develop. I myself graduated as an engineer in watch technology from the local engineer school. And I have plenty of ideas. It's not a matter of lacking idea and creativity. But you see, it's difficult to produce repetition minute under the Western name when most of your collection is in the few hundred dirham or few hundred Kuwait dinar at a time. Of course, luckily we have now evolved and we are now trying, thanks to also the repositioning. But something also very important I would like to emphasize: when you take over a brand, you need to be very cautious and respectful. Even though there were mistakes in the past, you cannot make a revolution. And too many times in the last 20 years, you have had very managers with high ego. They came and said, "Oh, the past must be wiped out, and this is the new brand." And I think this is an ego problem, and this destroyed many brands. You have to evolve, but you have to have the patience to do it. And you have also to have the support of your shareholders in the case of big groups. If you remember a man that has been criticized for his developments in the year 2010, Mr. Nataf from Zenith, he had very creative ideas, glamour ideas. I think it was pushing the brand too far. But probably he was the group was expecting him to make rapid results, and we saw it took a lot of time for this brand, for instance, to overcome this. A brand must be really treated with a lot of sensitivity, and
So
this is
you
what we
need
have
patience, you need
tried.
patience.
Yes, you need a very long term perspective. I think 10, 20, 30 years. Of efforts, it's too much
evolve,
for
to evolve, not even yeah.
yes,
very
and and today I'm very surprised. You see, the COVID crisis was also difficult for us, but we had a healthy situation, and we were just okay waiting. I've tried my best. If a new crisis come, I will try my best to breathe more air and not to hurt my head against the walls, trying to find solutions when there are no solutions. But after 2021. We experienced a surge of demand for our watches. I think I explained this surge and this also reposition. The market is today quite empty with quality Swiss automatic watches at reasonable price. And this 20 years process that we have been going through has started giving fruits. So from 2021, 2, 3, 4, we have experienced growth from 30 to 50% every year, which was also not easy to follow. We feel today quite free. You see, 2019, ITA didn't deliver any movement, and 2020, they said simply just before the crisis, the COVID crisis, they said we don't deliver anymore. So, but somehow after 5 years, I consider it like a great chance for us. Although again. This is very detrimental to the industry. We have seen it last few years, last 10 years, too many people trying to escape in the higher segment, trying to develop in-house movements that were not mature. You see, big brands have invested hundreds of millions to produce mechanical movements. It's not, and it took them 10, 15 years. So it's really not simple to go this way. And too many people will try and produce watches of doubtful quality also. If we consider it, I think you see today the Swiss watch industry is producing 15 million watches. It used to be 30 or 100 a long time ago. It's in everyone's interest that these watches are of good quality. And you see people trying to develop tourbillons in the last 15, 20 years. And after a few years, the company disappears. Nobody is there to service the watch. It's not good for the image of Swiss watches.
Yeah. So you're taking it slowly, but what is your favorite, or what is a watch that you would like, or a complication you would like to see part of West End?
So we have no real intention to launch highest complication, or perhaps you see we could launch a tourbillon for the fun, or a repetition minute, but I think the brand must concentrate on high quality three-hands automatic
But you
watches.
personally, what would you like to see?
I think the more and more I'm convinced that this way of refraining ourselves to develop highest complication is the best way. I think in the future probably we'll go into more perhaps like chronometer or you see, but in a very consistent way. Although of course everybody likes high complication like a repetition minute, or I personally very much like jumping hours.
That's definitely, that's something I wanted to tell you about.
The Western brand used to produce jumping hours in the 1930s, 40s.
Yeah.
You see, something I have also to emphasize. Everything has been somehow made in the industry over the 200 previous years. There is no revolution.
Yeah, it's very, very difficult to do
see,
that.
Everybody wants to say we are the inventors of this and that. You see, if you take a brand like Frank Muller that has proven a huge success since the 1990s with their Art Deco watches with crazy numerals. We have similar barrel-shaped watches with artistic numerals in the 1920s, 30s. The industry is
it repeats itself. That's definitely.
Yes. It's a matter of timing.
It's a matter of timing and
marketing.
And marketing. Look, you said something very interesting. Is that a lot of companies now in Swiss is basically maybe a marketing company.
Yes.
More than actually producing watches and that's what not the end consumer would see. because some people come to us and, okay, why don't we see a jumping hour from West End? Why don't we see a tourbillon? Because everybody can do a tourbillon. You can easily buy it from somewhere. But to you, quality is more important, and to you is producing it in a way.
I think the message of the brand must be consistent, and we are there for the long term. Yeah. And I don't want to spoil the image too much. Of course, perhaps there are sometimes we could put some oil on the fire by doing that, but we have to really already concentrate on a limited number of models that we master. Today, you see, in this fast-paced world, it's very important also to be able to master the logistic chain. Like in the last 2-3 years, we had really difficulties to follow the demand. Yeah. We cannot produce so many watches of same quality, so we have to again control and not try to take shortcuts. I think this is a lesson.
And what is your favorite model from the current collection then?
So we have a model that we have produced. We had reproduced this model from World War I in 2006 for the Behbehani company to commemorate Mr. Yaqub's achievements with the brand. And so we had produced 1,000 special pieces of this model, and we still produce this model in regular ways with a conic crystal, the model 6832. And so this model is still produced with different versions of
So that's
dials.
Your favorite?
Yes, because it's really a unique model with, you see, it's a pocket watch. We have kept the same 39 diameter with an extra thick conic crystal, 3.5 mm. Also with
the
welded horns.
Yeah.
It's not the best commercial product. This I have realized. People prefer integrated bracelets. But this is, I think, this model in the future. What we want also is to produce in higher versions. I think it is a watch that would deserve a solid gold, platinum edition. When you see it on the wrist of people who wear it, it's a high-end model. It's comparable to any kind Patek or Panerai. They have a similar also with
because it's basically, if you go to the history of it, it's a pocket watch.
Yes.
And then you have to add a welding. You weld to it
for the soldiers, for the wrist.
Soldiers,
you see,
yes.
it
and then
was
you add leather or whatever they used to do.
You see, pocket watches, real pocket watches at the time, they were having sizes like 50 to 60 mm, very
big,
bulky and reliable. We still have. Can you imagine in our factory we have a small collection of these pieces that are 120, 30, 40 years and still working. We have every week we have people from India or even sometimes from the Middle East that show us old models that were so reliable, still working today. The other day we had the visit of one man with a watch from Nepal with a Minerva chronograph. Again, Western was from Saint-Imier and Minerva is from next village, Villeray. And so everybody was collaborating. And can you imagine this chronograph with calendars is so now
it's a West End pocket watch with Minerva movement?
No, West End without any Minerva. But you if you open the watch, you see the Minerva movement.
Yes.
19.9. So to come back to this model was a reduction of these pocket watches that was made especially for the wrist. Yes, and this I think embodies really what our brand is standing for: something very simple, effective, and long-lasting in designs.
And I think this model also means a lot to us as timekeeper, because I think this is the model that we started with.
Yes.
So when we started the relationship with Mr. Yaqub and Hansel at the time, it was this watch that we tried to sell out and produce, and we had a huge success with it because it is, as you said,
unique also in the market.
Very unique in design and everything.
In terms of design, when you have it on the wrist, this special sapphire crystal sparkles like a diamond. It's really unique, and you see, again, we have to concentrate our efforts, but I hope in the future we can make different sizes, different variations. There is really a lot of potential, and I want this design to be kept in the collection forever. Then, of course, we have other models that are more commercial. But we always try to keep something, a design that will not look stupid in 5, 10, 20 years. A certain inertia is important. You see, a brand cannot be strong if it is constantly changing styles, and sometimes I would say even some of our models are a little bit old-fashioned or outdated in the design, but I think it's contributing to the strengths and attachment of the brand to.
And that lives for a very long time instead of something that's in fashion today but doesn't.
Yes.
So my last question would
Please.
be, where do you see West End in 5 years? Where do you wish to see West End in 5 years?
So really, I see now after COVID, the market has been really empty with good quality Swiss automatic watches. And I believe we can again be a player with volumes, with controlled volumes, because it's really difficult today to produce millions of mechanical watches. Our aim is to again produce 100,000 mechanical watches. Our price positioning, we want to keep today, you see our bestsellers in the region of $1,000 or a little less. And probably in the future we'll keep, but perhaps increase for certain collections. We have introduced now, for instance, a special diver watch with the Moby Dick name. This watch is retailing for $2,000. I think for what we offer, it is. We want to keep an offer that is very attractive in terms of prices. We want to bring the best in this price point, and I think there is a big potential in this in this segment that is neglected today by many players. Again, it's not easy to produce mechanical watches in volumes at attractive prices. Today, the watch industry is made of 3-4 big groups and very few independent like Western. So I think we will be the last on the playground if there should be a last company. And I think the time will tell. The continuity is something very important in my mind. And I try now, my daughter is turning 20, my son, my first son, 18. I hope we can, I already started to introduce them. They accompany me sometimes on trips, and I want to pass these over the time and make the brand live much longer. So to continue this very emotional relationship, in particular with the Gulf region.
Definitely. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for you.
I really hope you enjoy your stay in Kuwait, and
Certainly.
we need this visit more often.
Certainly. We have such a close relationship with the Behbehani family, and in particular with Mr. Akil that we know for 20 years. That's also supported us very much in the past. So certainly we'll have the opportunity to come more often.
Inshallah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. Really
Thank you very
appreciate
much.
it. Thanks a lot.